His current project examines Jewish urbanization under the early Abbasids and current migration of those Jews to the Islamic Mediterranean. He's preparing a translation of Maimonides' Guide to Perplexity with Len Goodman to be published in 2018. Thank you, Phil.
Thanks very much. So what I would like to do, in line with the theme, right, theologians in a jurist robe, is to explore a responsum of Maimonides and show how it connects or doesn't to just a little snippet from the guide. To my mind, the responsa are where the rubber meets the road for the jurists, right? I do not believe that they are an unvarnished picture or unblemished picture of the social reality itself, but as I've argued, responses should be seen as advocacy pieces for the various sides in a legal dispute that a writer brings to bear with real live individuals in front of him. And for this reason, we find Maimonides at times writing for both disputants in a case and coming up with a different answer for each of them. I believe that the judges or qadis sit there with these various responsum and choose which responsum they wish to go with. So with that in mind, as the sort of Sitzenleben of the responsum itself, right, we'll see here that that Maimonides is sort of, I think, letting his has some real individuals, a real case in mind, and we'll get some of that detail. But first, we'll begin with a little piece from the guide. This is sort of well known to people in that it discusses the use or abuse of sifat or descriptors or attributes to be ascribed to God. Let me get a volunteer to read the piece in English. If you read it in the Judeo-Arabic, you're going to see that I put a little apostrophe in the wrong place for the word al-qada. So let me get a volunteer to read it in the English, please.
Phil?
Yes, please. Please, Jesse. Yeah. Thought maybe you had a question. Feel free to say, yes, please.
When any subject is described positively by a predicate saying it is thus and so, the disciple must be one of these 5 types. If you consider all these predicates and others of the sort, you'll find none applicable to God.
Okay, so here, right, he's going to say there are positive descriptors, right, particularly in biblical language that are used to describe God, and then he goes forth and describes all of that. And he says, if you consider all of these predicates and others of the like, you'll find none applicable to God, but rather there is a poetry, if you will, right, there is a relationship between God and the created world. It is that of creator to created, right? It is not a matter of degree whereby we can use these positive descriptors to which humanity, right, might be, through which humanity might be described, and simply say it's a matter of degree. God is even better, or even more just, and so on. So folks are well aware of this problem in the guide, but of course, as he is well aware, biblical language uses these positive descriptors. And not only does biblical language use these positive descriptors, but people recite the biblical language, right? So Maimonides is not only, right, a philosopher, he's not only a jurist, he's a member of the Jewish community. So what happens when Maimonides goes into synagogue and the line from Exodus 34:6 with the 13 attributes of God are pronounced in the synagogue? What is he thinking as he is sitting there in the room? Okay, so fortunately, we have a responsum to this effect. Let me, Ezra, you're a native English speaker, please start us off.
Question. Teach us, our Rabbi, about the custom in force in Alexandria, that when the reader comes to the recitation of the 13 attributes which are in Parshat Kitisa, he is silent until the congregation recites them aloud in the group. Okay, so in contemporary Jewish practice, right, the so-called 13 attributes from this line in Exodus are recited a couple different times. Sadi Gaon has them recited liturgically in Yom Kippur in the Slichot.
Okay, there are also other parts in the beginning of the Torah service, but it seems here, and folks can certainly attack this now or we can wait until the response period, that what's going on is the Torah reader has come to this portion in Parashat Kitisa, and the Torah reader stops, and everybody in the community recites the 13 attributes, and then the Torah reader picks up with the recitation from the scroll itself. Okay? Keep going, please, Esther.
When Rabbeinu Pinchas, may his rock protection, came to us, he disavowed this practice.
Okay, so we know Rabbeinu Pinchas. This is a real guy, right? He comes to Alexandria, right? At first, when he comes there, maybe not a great Arabic speaker, serves as a judge, and so on. And my own conjecture is that maybe he learned some Arabic over time. But you can see he's bringing some of his French minhagim, perhaps. What are you guys doing, reciting this in the synagogue? He disavows this practice. Keep going.
Saying that it was not fitting to split up the epithets in the recitation, since we cannot complete the recounting of the 13 attributes unless we mention the two mentions of the Tetragrammaton as two names. And the recitation should follow the earlier practice. People have split into factions in this matter.
Okay, so we're just imagining the community in Alexandria is up in arms, right? There are those folks who want to continue the practice. Rabbi Pinchas and his followers are on the other side. And one of Maimonides' problems, right, is this line of the 13 attributes begins with the Tetragrammaton twice. So, are those two mentions of the Tetragrammaton each a distinct attribute of the 13 attributes, right? It would be easy if Maimonides would say, okay, there are really 12 attributes, right? And the first one is repeated, right? And so on. But no, we are married to the idea of the 13 attributes, at least they are in this community, and the questioners from the community of Alexandria, right, who maybe are against Rabbi Pinchas, right? They're pushing back against Rabbi Pinchas's innovation of disavowing this practice. How can we break up this verse from the Torah such that there are 13 attributes? Okay? So, that's the beginning of the question. Let's keep going. Let's switch readers. Please.
Give us a fatwa, our glorious master. Is this recitation mentioned in the Talmud? And what are its grounds? And recount for us the 13 attributes in order to resolve problems in their congregations. Or perhaps the situation is simply a traditional practice or protocol, and one may choose whether or not to recite this. Clarify this for us well, as we have become accustomed to your grace, and may God not refrain from shining his light on us. And do not wipe away from the Jewish community a heart like yours. May your heart explain this and bring the problem to light and clear it up. Amen.
Okay, so not only, again, does the community of Alexandria want to know what the right practice is, they want to know what the grounds are, they want to know what the 13 attributes are. Okay, so we're all ready to hear Maimonides' response. It's a little bit long, I cut it off, we'll have the first little piece. Let's switch readers for his response. Please, you.
This entire recitation has no source, nor is it mentioned anywhere in the words of our rabbis.
Okay, it's exactly what the community wanted to know, right? Where does this practice of having the community recite and then the reader recite? No mention anywhere in the words of the rabbis. Keep going. Please.
As near as I can see it, it is a practice of the cantors which have become popular. However, as for me, I don't deem it necessary at all, since I know no source for it, and it does not have a clear meaning, though I don't disavow one who does deem it necessary due to its popularity in most congregations.
Okay, right? So he's gonna, clearly he doesn't see a Talmudic source for this, but, where the community has this practice of reciting them. Now remember, right, these are attributes right out of the Bible. Right, so people are reading this, which he would describe as poetic, right? And so this is not the same as if in common parlance I'm simply saying, God is great, right? But this is rather a biblical verse. Nonetheless, right, it's not just, as we saw earlier today, right, a piece of study. Because if it were just study, then it would be the Torah reader who's engaging in the study. Now, instead, we have other people in the congregation reciting this set of attributes. Okay, keep going, please.
Rather, I might simply leave them alone. The matter generally follows the traditional practice, and it is neither recommended nor frowned upon, let alone either a sin or an obligation.
Okay, so and by the way, right, the words that he uses are quite interesting. They, let's see, that it's frowned upon, right, makruh and mustahab, that it is recommended, right, and let alone there after that, you know, a chat or a sawab, right, and so on. So neither a sin nor an obligation, and so on. All right, keep going, please.
As for the first mention, it is not part of the 13 attributes. This is the correct matter. I have not ever heard otherwise.
Okay, so then he proceeds in the responsum to go through and outline exactly what each of the 13 attributes is. Despite the fact in the guide, right, he said we are not really supposed to see these attributes as descriptive of God, but perhaps they are poetic. Right? So despite the fact that, again, he said this in the guide, right? He still allows for the community to recite this. What does he do? What is his, how does he deal with this in the synagogue? Everyone else is reciting the attributes out loud. You know, does he sort of cover his ears? Does he go out of the room? Right? It's not entirely clear, but it says it's something that he doesn't do. And yet, right, it says that he is taraktum, I believe. Right? I simply allowed them to go ahead and do it. Okay? So, in this response, I find particularly interesting. While he is nonetheless dealing with a biblical text, he at the same time feels obligated to lay out exactly what each of those 13 attributes is. Of course, he comes to the number that they have asked him to outline. That's what I wanted to present you guys because, again, we can see, I think, what Maimonides says in the guide, right, does play out in the fatwa number 1. It is not his practice to recite them, okay? But ultimately, what we're talking about reciting is a piece of biblical poetry, if you will. Those sifat, those descriptors, are something that he would allow as part of that prophetic language, right? Whereas, again, in common parlance, he does not believe one can use it as the least bit accurate as a descriptor of God.
Thank you, Phil. Finishing early as well. Our next correspondent is Tirza Meacham. Tirza is an associate professor of Talmudic and